Well, welcome everyone to the Research in Clinical Trials January Roundtable. My name is Shannon Benson, and I am one of the co-chairs of this work group, along with Dr. Sneha Phadke, who is also on the call. Today's roundtable is focusing on the difficult conversations that may be required in clinical trial enrollment processes. For some, topics such as gender identity, sexual orientation, culture, language, and more can be difficult to discuss. Presenting today is Margaret Farrell, who works with NIH's All of Us program, working to create the most diverse health databases in history. Margaret, we're glad to have you.
Thank you so much. I'm so delighted to be here. So if you give me a moment to pop my slides up and then slideshow. No matter how many times you do this, it's always a certain amount of art into reality. But thank you so much. And where I went with the prompt was I thought that what I could possibly offer to this conversation really is talking about kind of what we're doing at the All of Us research program around plain language and science insights to think about these difficult conversations and really kind of bridging that gap, right, between the questions that we ask and the why behind them. So in thinking about this presentation, I came up, like every good public health person, right, with an idea of like where I'd really like you to go and to give you a sense of our work, but then to really open it up and to give you all an opportunity. Hopefully some of the reflections that I'm offering you from all of us will kind of prompt you for your own reflections about the work that you do, because this is not revolutionary by any means. But what I'd like to do is give you a sense of the overview of the All of Us research program, explain how we're beginning to use the research highlights, that research insights that are coming out of our program to really kind of bridge the gap with these difficult conversations and perhaps offer some of this up, as well as to kind of to think about another way that we did, that we've been working with our frontline staff in particular to really build their capacity around these difficult conversations and what we did there. So the disclaimer, and this is what I mentioned to everybody when I first got on the call, so much of what I know about public health, I know because I worked with the cancer control movement and working with coalitions. And that's, it was how I thought about the presentation here, and also how I would like you to kind of hear my insights as well. Like we all know that working in public health, one size does not fit all, and that what works in one context doesn't work in all contexts. But that I really think that one of the gifts of the comprehensive cancer control movement really is its emphasis on evidence-based practices and using what works and highlighting those lessons learned, that those data-driven insights that we can kind of pull across. So that was how working with the Cancer Coalitions really informed my perspective around public health, and certainly the perspective that I brought to all of us. And hopefully what I've learned from all of us will be able to kind of filter back to you. But please do know that like I come here with all the questions and few of the answers, but hopefully some, I did put thought into this presentation to kind of get at some of the themes that I hope that you'll be interested in kind of picking up on. So just really quickly, what is the All of Us research program? We are moving, right? We're really looking to accelerate health research and medical breakthroughs by bringing together a cohort of 1 million and more Americans from all walks of life and pulling together all kinds of data, whether it's from surveys or electronic health records or passively collecting data and whole genome sequences, and really kind of, and really making a robust data set that's available for all to drive research across all different intersections and all different kinds of health and disease. And so we're nurturing partnerships with 1 million or more people, with a special emphasis on people that are underrepresented in the biomedical in biomedical research. And I'll talk a little bit more about that. And then really kind of pulling researchers together as well, and really creating this ecosystem where we can all learn from each other. So the first question that we always get is, well, you know, you're moving towards 1 million, how's that going, right? So as of last week, and please know they did update my slides. You know, we've gotten 750,000 people who have registered with the program, and you can begin to see more than 500,000 people from all across the country have begun to contribute data and make data available to us. And happy to talk more about all of us. But we are very, very proud that over 80% of our participants are underrepresented in biomedical research. We call it our UBR categories. And you can see here kind of what does that look like? What does that mean? But really kind of drawing from a broad spectrum of people. And we do this because we are very intentional about working with community partners and really bringing in people who have been left behind in the past. And we're beginning to see, and this is what do we mean by inclusion and representation? We know, and you know, that bringing people into clinical trials, whether it's the All of Us research program, whether it's cancer trials, that we really have to be so very intentional about all of our work and really prioritize this work and work towards it. And it's in that spirit that that, you know, like I'm presenting this information. And perhaps the most important thing that we do, and probably the work that I know that Iowa does so well, is really engaging communities through trusted partners. And isn't that what the comprehensive cancer control movement is, right? That we have enrollment sites, we have funded partners throughout the country, but really at the end of the day, our work is in the community. And really and how I'd like to kind of structure my insights today is really talking about what we're learning through the community, how we're kind of like trying to disseminate this work through the community. So our current protocol, we collect data in a variety of ways through connecting electronic health records, self-reported data through surveys, as well as demographic data as well. We ask participants to provide physical measurements if we enroll them in person, and also biosamples, whether if it's in person with blood and urine collection, saliva, and remote height and weight for our remote participants. And then we also invite participants to share data from wearables or digital apps. And because we collect so much data from so many participants, we have an incredibly rich data set. And so currently within our data set, we have survey responses from more than 400,000 participants. We have data from long read sequencing data from more than 1,000 people. We have the largest set of whole genome sequence data that's widely available for research. We're really working hard both on the enrollment side as well as making data available, and happy to speak more and to give you more information about how we're providing this data. But we've had data available to researchers for the past 3 years, and we're kind of ramping up now for what we call CDR V8, like our eighth iteration of our data set, and looking forward to making more data available. But as of earlier today, we have more than 8,000 registered researchers who are have access to using the data. We have I didn't update this number. We have close to 8,000 active research projects underway, 360 publications, and more than 600 organizations that have researchers, have have entered the data use agreement to use our data set. And while we're really proud of the diversity of our data and our participants, we're really proud too by the diversity of our researchers as well. And that we're really bringing up, really getting the imagination of researchers who come from a variety of different backgrounds to come and drive their research with all of us. So in thinking about what can I offer to the conversation around consent and difficult conversations, I wanted to offer 2 case studies. One of them is the work that my team is leading in terms of plain language summaries and what we're kind of finding in that work. And then the other work is some of our work that we've done to skill up frontline staff around a mental health and well-being survey. So I'm going to kind of roll through these case studies, and then hopefully there'll be time for a robust conversation afterwards. I have all my windows closed, so if there are questions in the chat, I'm unable to be distracted by them. But so just be patient, and I used to be much more pliable when I was younger, but here we are. You get who you invited, right? But one of the things, like as I said, we have these 300 and some odd publications that are coming out of the program, and one of the things that we've been really keen to do is to really kind of understand how can we kind of bridge the gap with participants and really kind of begin to show them the value of their participation. We started enrolling participants 5 years ago. And so for some of our participants, it's been 5 years since they've completed the survey, and to really kind of like draw the line between like, well, you're sending me, we're forever asking, well, we have this new survey, but really kind of making the case for the fact that, they've been generous to us already, and how can we begin to talk about the research that's coming out of the program in a way that it shows examples of how their contributions are driving discoveries, really kind of elevating the data set and really kind of nurture those engagements and prompt enrollment. And as I'm kind of walking through our research highlights project, what I'd like to do is really to invite you, as you're thinking about your clinical trial enrollments, are there other things that you can think of that would be similar to what we're doing in all of us, using the data, using the research, using the projects that you have going on in your site, and offering this up as perhaps a model that you could think about translating into your context? So what we began to do with, we started this project called the All of Us Research Highlights as a specific type of science communications to really kind of bridge that gap. Could we think about plain language summaries? And in our context, it was really important that we do it in English and Spanish. And to really make sure that we're talking about good science that's coming out of the program that could really kind of draw the line between how the data that someone is contributing is driving onto research. And this is an example here of research highlights, and I should have queued them up in the chat, but I'll send links at the end of the presentation, and certainly as a follow-up. But when we developed the plain language, and this is an example of one of them, so if you squint, maybe you can see it. But we made these, like, I always call them like a pizza slice, right? So these like 500-word summaries of publications that kind of have like a 3-bullet key takeaway piece, and then more and more information as you go along, so like if you can only have time for one bite, you can get like those 3 takeaways. But the more you kind of dig into, even at the 500-word summary level, that you can kind of like dig in and really kind of get a sense, and provides an opportunity for us to sort of layer on those important messages. And it's really important. So down at the end, so this is kind of what we're doing. So we're making these kinds of plain language summaries with participants in mind, 3 to 5 top line takeaways, trying to come up with images that pull a need to know message away, and then really kind of trying to reflect our program's key messages within the text of the research highlight itself. So using a health equity frame, I think sometimes when we talk about data coming out from wearables, to really, like to be cognizant that not everybody is going to be able to do 10,000 steps in the same way, right? So thinking about how do we provide information in a way that's accessible to all. And then I think just such an important lesson learned is to talk about not just what data was being used, but to talk about study limitations. I think that we always think that, oh, well, we'll wait until like we've all the data, but it's okay to present what we're learning with all of us is presenting data as it's coming out and to begin to contextualize it as a way to begin to think about those conversations with people coming into the program. And I think that that's really bridging the gap for us. How can we talk about the fact that with more data, we'll understand more things? I offered this because I do know that everybody in the coalition does like to know that things work, So one of the things that we've been trying to see with research highlights is, well, what do people do when they read them, like when they go to the website? And we're really seeing that people are beginning to use these plain language summaries, and kind of whether they're joining the program or logging in as somebody who's been, they have an account and they're going to the website to kind of reactivate their account, or they'll like subscribe for more information or go to our research site. And we're really trying, so like I offer this to you to really kind of, we're beginning to see that this is a bit of a promising practice, that they're not just, people are reading these and not just sort of like moving on, but using them as an entryway to continue to engage with the program. What you know and what I know, but important to note, right? That creating content really is only the first step, right? That it's where the content lives is where it's doing its most good. And I think that as you're thinking about these challenging conversations and what kind of makes sense, I would sort of offer up some of the reflections, some of the work that we're doing with our research highlights. So we have them on our .gov website, which is kind of like their landing place. But I always like to, when I have the opportunity to talk about them, just say like that's where they live, but not necessarily where they work. And I think thinking about communications in terms of where something works is such an important implementation strategy. So whether it's on a social media channel where you know that that's going to raise awareness, putting content there, and then putting it like in the hands. So these are two of our participant-facing resources, newsletters, whether it's like read more in English and Spanish. And then I also had a picture of obviously it's dated, right? Because everybody's in masks. But in some of our clinical settings, using these plain language summaries have been used in like pop-up staff meetings, to really kind of, bring everybody together about, well, this is the science that's coming out of the program. And I think that this last piece of building capacity is really what is a thread that I'm looking to pull on in 2024, to really think about how can we equip those people who are getting those questions as you're talking about these difficult conversations. What do people need to know to better understand, wow, you're asking a lot of questions about my identity. You're asking a lot of questions about my personal habits. You're asking a lot of questions about my family health history. Where is this all going? And I think that while it's important to talk to people in clinical trials about how their data is being used. It's just as important to really kind of skill up each other and those people that really are at that front and center of making the case for participation, talking to people during consent. In our case, like as people are getting their blood drawn, like these are opportunities to really reflect back the science and to really kind of close that gap. And again, like showing up with the science, with research insights in all of the places that we're expecting participants to show up, it really is such an important part. And I think what we're finding from the data to be like such an important and an impactful piece of this. So writing the content certainly is so important, and writing it well and writing it in a way that makes it accessible, but then also doing the hard work of getting it into the hands of the people that can tell these stories and make this conversation is an important part of this work. An example of a difficult conversation that our frontline staff do. So these would be the people as you're coming into. There are two ways that you can be a part of the All of Us program. One of them is to join as a direct volunteer. So these are people who wouldn't be coming into an enrollment site, but really only have an online relationship with all of us. And then the other part of our enrollment is in-person enrollment within enrollment sites. So whether it be like hospital clinics or community-based clinics, or we do a lot of work with FQHCs, for example. And because we're really trying to engage with people who are underrepresented in biomedical research, we find that we're much more able to engage with people from these communities through our in-person sites. So really kind of working with frontline staff who might be the person checking someone into the clinic, the person who's walking through a survey with someone, the person, especially during COVID, but has continued delivering surveys by phone. These are all of like the different jobs that our frontline staff do. But we ask a lot of, and I thought that this might be helpful as you're thinking about your challenging conversations. We have a personal and family health history survey. And right now we have data from more than 300,000 participants. And this is like an example of one of the questions that comes up that certainly, is challenging, right? Like what talking about family history, this can be stigmatizing, right? And then going off into branching questions. And we find on our online survey instruments that this is one of those surveys, particularly with the branching, excuse me, that we find people kind of giving up, like stopping conversations, or stopping to answer. We'll have a lot of incompletes. We also have our social determinants of health survey, and this is also a newer survey, so it has fewer responses. But again, asking around social support, asking around discrimination, food insecurity, again, difficult conversations. And something also that we're working hard to really unpack what helps, gets our response rates up. And then finally, a new survey that we released about halfway through last year on mental health and well-being. Really asking questions about phobias and personalities, really, difficult questions. So what did we do in, particularly, so knowing that some of our standard surveys around the social determinants of health, around family health history, around personally identifying information, that we're finding high skips, incompletes. We went as a program to really kind of dig into like what are these, how can we begin to really address this work? So the next couple of slides want to present some of what our frontline staff have reflected back to us and how they really kind of helped us shape, particularly around the mental health surveys. So one of the things we heard loud and clear from our frontline staff is that they needed more resources, like things that they could begin to point people to. So as they were either talking to people about surveys or walking someone through a survey, in your context, it could be helping someone begin by their self-reported demographic. Really, when there are those questions that someone finds very difficult, what are those resources that we can begin to pull in, both for our participants as well as for our frontline staff? So really providing those resources, whether it's for us, we do them both for the frontline staff as well as with the online surveys. We've now begun to layer in questions and resources within the surveys themselves that can kind of pull out and really point people to additional resources. I'll come back to this again, but this was incredibly well received by our frontline staff when we began to pilot it. To really, and what they found most helpful was that those just-in-time resources, right? To provide resources, whether it's for frontline staff or for the participants themselves, like to be able to go someplace, get some more information, and come back in. So we're building on this and really trying to link not just additional resources. So for food insecurity, really kind of think about what else can we provide in terms of referring people out, but also are these opportunities that we can push in also with research highlights and research summaries as well. And one of the things that and this is very like in the weeds, but just to really kind of give a sense of just how we really went about this training in a very robust and systematic way across the program. And we did it in two ways. We did it both in terms of subject matter. We did trainings for staff as well as self-guided trainings. And the reason why I offered this, we really kind of thought that we'd be able to do one or the other. But what we learned, particularly with the mental health and well-being surveys, is that we needed a combination of both. That doing the SME trainings was really important, and we get a lot of ongoing. We've begun to asynchronously republish them on a quarterly basis as well. So if you didn't see it the first time it was live, it's new to you, right? So really kind of making those trainings available, and then really augmenting them with that self-guided trainings. We honestly thought that we'd be able to just sort of do this one-time training or just do self-guided, but we find that we have to do more of a mix rather than even one or the other. And then the other thing that was incredibly well received with the mental health survey, and that some of our coalitions or some of our consortium members are beginning to do is the Ask the Experts sessions. And this was one of our program PIs who talked about his work in mental health research. And we have found this also as we're thinking about all of the research coming out, having all of us in the community, and really bringing in researchers, whether it's at a pop-up or disseminating videos or really kind of having researchers talking about their research as a really important metric for whether it's participants, giving them a sense of how their data is being used, and certainly for frontline staff to begin to broker those conversations. And then this is just sort of like a sense of what we did when we launched our survey in terms of outreach materials and just that continuing outreach. And again, to really kind of think about, I know that certainly I wouldn't speak for your work, but often we think about launching something, right? But it's that ongoing care and feeding along the way. What are those opportunities that we have for continuing conversations that we can continue to do? And this is an example of our in-survey resources. If people feel that these pop-up windows that we've built into our conversations that could be something that you might want to think about in terms of what are those just-in-time opportunities, whether it's during the consent process, whether it's before consent, or whether it's that ongoing engagement with people who have shared their information with you, that you know, like, are there ways you can begin to or continue to or build upon those opportunities you have for that continuing conversation? And then whether those, we put a lot of time, particularly for mental health education, thinking about those national resources as well. So this was kind of where I was thinking about starting this conversation. And this is my contact information, where I just sort of want to leave you, or as a start to this, to think about. I think one of the things that we see a great deal with all of us really is this, I'm going to stop sharing. Really is this opportunity. We collect so much data, particularly around demographics. And so many times we hear from participants, we hear from frontline staff, what are you doing with all of this data? You know, so really kind of thinking about what are those examples. We're very fortunate, all of us, that we can leverage now that we have studies coming out of the program. We can begin to really kind of unpack that. But I would posit for you, if you are where we were this time last year, in that we didn't have very many surveys, very many publications. We didn't have a lot of research coming out, and hard to really kind of make those conversations. What else is happening in the literature? What can you learn from other cancer consortiums, from other studies, that you can begin to really kind of feed back? And for that, I'd really be very anxious is the word I'm going to choose. It's not the right word, but to really kind of offer up some of the research that's coming out of all of us. We have a lot of cancer research, and a lot of research that really looks at beyond the demographics, right? That really kind of, like, as people identify through all different types of backgrounds, and I'm sorry, it's my home phone, but you know, like, as people are self-reporting data, to begin to really unpack this and to draw this line into how data is being used to generate insights. So hopefully there's a couple of things that that you would find helpful, or and in return, I'm very, very, very interested in learning from you what you're learning, you know, like, in your difficult conversations. Do you use plain language insights, and what does that look like? How do you reflect back? I know when I would work with some state cancer coalitions, we would use the state cancer profiles to really talk about not just to identify needs in the community, but to really make the case for people to get involved in research, you know? And I'm really interested in learning from you, like, what are those things that you're feeling, or that you consider to be promising practices that can help all of our conversations. So with that, I'm gonna toss it back, Kelly, Brianna, Shannon, to you, and hopefully this was kind of the conversation starters that you thought I'd bring, and but if not, happy to recalibrate also. But questions, your own insights, I'd love to open this up.
Yeah, of course. First off, thank you so much, Margaret. That was such a wonderful presentation. And yeah, I guess it's time for the Q&A. So if you guys have any questions for Margaret about her presentation, feel free to put them in the chat or feel free to unmute.
I have a question. I'll kick us off, and it's probably one that most folks on this call know the answer to, but I'll admit, because I'm not deep into that process, I don't know. Margaret, as you were talking about the different trainings and support you provide to the people who are having the conversations, it made me realize how just vast training could be for people who are having difficult conversations, and what a big lift that could be for institutions or health systems. And my question is just, what is normal? So like, what does a cancer center here in Iowa, so this might be a question both for you, Margaret, but then also for people who are on the call, but what is a normal amount of training, if any, that people who are in the consenting process receive about having hard conversations, or getting people to the right resources within that process?
So I muted myself, I'm sorry. I'll take a first crack, because silence makes me uncomfortable, but really, you know, I think that it isn't a matter of scaling as well. You know, I think that with all of our work, we have to be so very mindful of our IRB, I'm sure, you know, and that's true across all of, you know, like there's only so much that you can do, and to be really careful about not over promising. But I think that it's equipping staff so that they can, like, just enough that someone feels comfortable beginning conversations and being comfortable enough to say, I don't have all of the answers, but here's a promising practice, and you know, like, this is why we're encouraging you to be a part of research, you know. And I think that that's always the, like, such a hard line. I think that we found with our staff, particularly with mental health, but what do you do when someone reflects that they've had suicidal thoughts? You know, like, what are those? So that was something with that particular survey that we really felt that there were ethical considerations too. And I think that was pretty clear, you know, like, what kinds of resources do we need to make available in those circumstances. But I think that there's where there's more space for creativity, I think, particularly around demographics, or particularly around questions of, why are you asking me all of this information? Why do you need this? I think that that's really where science communications and really being thoughtful about you know, cancer research that's coming out, you know, and to be able to make that case, I think that's the exciting thing. And I always think that, you know, if you have one study that you can speak about, you know, like you just need one, you know, and that's an overstatement, but if everyone had their elevator speech of why cancer research is important in Iowa, or why it's important for an Iowan to be involved in this study or this project, not to the exclusion of others, but really making that case for where people are coming from. Because if you have someone who's gotten this far as beginning to consent in the process, you've gotten them pretty far through, you know, like they're aware that your work is going on, and they want someone to make that case for them. And I think what is just enough training, I think, is really, from where I sit in science communications, is really beginning to make that case, you know, and whether it's talking about collecting sex and gender minority data of sufficient quality so that we can really begin to see differences, you know, between how people self-identify and their level of care. So I think that's a great example. Certainly, there's a lot coming out, isn't there, in the cancer literature about treatment and people's follow-up and openness to care and access to care. And the reason why we're able to begin to see those differences across people's ethnic identities, across races, across how people self-identify by sex, by gender, by language. And I think because we're able to see those studies coming out now, it makes it easier to begin to make that case. So I think in working, and isn't that an exciting translational piece, right? So if there's a study that's coming out of another state, you know, like, or research certainly that's coming out of Iowa, or research that your coalition has contributed, it's easy to make that case. But really kind of beginning to sort of where I would have you start is really beginning to kind of think about what are those three big barriers that you want to sort of filter up and begin to unpack. And I think one study, you know, teaching someone how to talk about one study in three different ways so that it tells that compelling story about, you know, one of the things that we're finding what research highlights is because we're able to say, like, this study was possible because participants shared their EHRs, right? And that gives the data type Y. We were able to, it had sufficient power to look at different demographic groups. We have a study that looked at Latinos that were born in and out of the United States and liver cancer incidents, you know, and really it was easy to make the case that, like, we were able to really see a difference between people that were like liver cancer risk, people that were born outside of the United States, because we had enough power. And so that's a powerful conversation for our partners working in Latino communities, but also for others, right? That, like, talking about, like, being able to power different kinds of research because we're inviting people to show up and to be represented and for your research to count. And I think that those are the kinds of messages that I would like to, that we're seeing in all of us, that that really are beginning to sort of power our work. And would invite you to think about those too. So I don't think that you need like a study for every possible scenario, but I do think that, you know, really bringing your staff in, you know, really kind of bringing our own scientific literacy to see the work through that lens. Like, how can a study power different kinds of conversations, I think is really a worthy, I think that isn't that the kind of work that a coalition can do well, right? Because you're bringing so many different people together that look at things from so many different angles. And I think that brings out the best of the best of our work, you know, the best of all of us.
Thank you.
Like, are there things that you all are seeing that that you're finding helpful in terms of like brokering these difficult conversations? Whatever they may be.
My name's Sneha Fadki. I'm a breast medical oncologist at the University of Iowa. I'm one of the co-chairs of this group. And one of the things that, got me thinking about is when we're consenting for clinical trials, there are just uncomfortable things that we need to bring up sometimes, like someone's sexual history, making sure they're on, that they're on contraception of some sort, or, whatever that might be, which, a lot of us are not, maybe some of the consenting staff are not very comfortable with at first. And one of the things, as a medical student that we practiced these challenging conversations, we'd have patient simulations where not this particular, for clinical trials, but breaking bad news or taking a sexual history, things that are inherently uncomfortable. We just did these patient simulations to practice them. And so part of it, I think, is just doing them more and more and getting that practice. But then, on top of just these inherently uncomfortable or just topics you don't have a lot of practice talking about, there could be cultural differences and especially language barriers that I think make that even more complex. And so I don't really I have a question, just my thoughts about when I was listening to you speak.
No, and I agree. And sometimes, yeah, and sometimes those language barriers, it's almost easier to navigate around the ones that you know versus the ones you don't know. You like how it like you like all kinds of interpersonal communications, right? Like, well, I think I landed that point, but how I understood the question and those disconnects. And I think that's, isn't it true, right? In clinical trials that the stakes are higher, and making the case for, and I'm sure a difficult conversation too is when someone's not eligible, or isn't part, like what do we do with the answers that we have to give as well? Those are all really good points, but certainly the practicing, I think that's certainly, yeah, I think that's something I'll have to think about bringing back into.
Hello, my name is Bridget. This group is really quiet, and I'm like you, Margaret, it gets uncomfortable, doesn't it? So
I'm trying so hard, Bridget. I was hoping you were going to say something when your camera went on.
So, just listening to the conversation, it just takes my thoughts back to how, it does kind of feel uncomfortable sometimes on both sides. I think, just me have working in healthcare and, maybe being with a family, thinking about myself as a family member. I had a brother who participated in some research when he had cancer. And just as a family member, taking all the medical out of my mind, just being a family member and in my family kind of taking that experience that we had, listening to like my mom, my sisters, and other people, and saying, I think a lot of myths about what research is, about what they felt that their understanding was, feeling like the communication wasn't very clear on what that research meant to him, not really understanding things like what phase of that research that was. So then their story to the next family member is like, oh, you don't really want to do that because this is what we felt that we experienced. And I think, now sitting on the healthcare side, to be in that place where you're having a conversation with a patient, just making sure that you being as honest as possible, like explaining things to their understanding, making sure we're hearing back from them. And I think, when people start putting out, well, I heard it was this, or I heard this about research, I think on my side as a medical person, that can kind of feel uncomfortable too, and making sure that I kind of can talk through those things and having that level of comfort with a person to say, yes, we've heard some of those things before. Thank you for bringing those to the table and let's talk about it, to kind of bring that, a little bit of a comfort. I don't know if it's comfort or just kind of, I think people just really need to feel the honesty of the conversation and really walk away with an understanding to make that judgment. And then on my end, also doing some research type things myself, just telling people, well, I know there's research out there. I know there's probably articles and things like that, but I want to learn from you. Letting them understand what they're rolling at and how we're learning from them specifically outside of what we've learned, in other places, just letting them understand the importance of having a voice in the situation when maybe historically they felt like there wasn't a voice, and I think that has helped a lot of people kind of view some of the research differently, feeling like they're a part of a change, that their voices are being heard despite of historical issues. And I've found that to kind of bring a little bit more success to some of those conversations.
Such important insights. Thanks, Bridget. And a reminder too, right? So often, you've had one clinical trial enrollment, you've had one clinical trial enrollment, right? That all different, I'm sure everybody's coming with different, trials in mind. But for family members, recognizing that it can be coming at a very difficult time, and you hear it through the lens of the time that you're present in as well, right? That no, I think those are exceptional points, Bridget. Thank you.
And then we just got a question in the chat. So Caroline was saying she's actually from New York City and being new to navigating healthcare in Iowa, she's curious if you're seeing huge differences in the ability or willingness to share personal info kind of based on location. So willingness to share based on if you're coming from an urban area, from a rural area. Yeah.
I don't want to step on anybody's, steps. I think that one of the things that we're seeing with the research highlights more than anything else is the fact that when the conversation is coming from like a trusted a trusted emissary, like a partner or somebody from the community, it's always much better received than just a blank, whatever, an anonymous email versus a person, and really any person. And I'd be interested in the rural urban reflections that others are better a community, better reflecting. But I think that it does to a certain extent, and certainly what Bridget was saying too about, being able to reflect your family's experience. Those personal connections really, like, what a difference that makes in terms of the grace with which people hear our conversations, as well as the content. But really interested in the rural versus urban. I'm sure that you see differences even across Iowa as well. One of the things that we learned that you can tell I'm very uncomfortable in silence. One of the things that we found is that certainly with materials, how very important it was that people that we had representation. People saw, well, all of us is an urban program. I know our colleagues in Wisconsin who are doing more working in farmlands and rural parts of the state, really will be very quick to say that what works for them, even within the state, would be two very different, both in terms of how you show up, in terms of where you're meeting people, and the times that you're making available for people to enroll, but as well as the like the content and the examples themselves, that people can see themselves in the promotional materials, they'll see themselves in the examples that would offer, and that will make a big difference in terms of response. But interested in what you're doing across the state in that way.
I also wonder if it's comfort with sharing information, how much of it is that and how much of it is access. And, I did a study years ago looking at how patients like to get their test results. And it was interesting that some of the people that lived in more rural areas were not comfortable accessing their patient portal. Maybe because of issues with internet connectivity or just not being as comfortable with it. And so, maybe part of it is just differences in how they like to get or give information.
I'm going to jump in unless there's anyone else who would also like to add on. If not, well, again, Margaret, thank you so much for your presentation. It was super insightful. I personally very much enjoyed listening to it. Oh, there's one more comment in the chat. Make sure it's not a question. Yeah, we have Caroline again saying that that's a good point, and that there could be differences amongst age groups too when it comes to technology and portals. But yes, so in the interest of time, I will really quick, if it's all right, throw it to Kelly Sittig to see if there's any updates for the consortium or any events you'd like to share.
Yeah, thanks, Bree. And yeah, Margaret, thank you so much. We just appreciate your time so much and your willingness to share your wisdom. We just have a couple updates that I'll share with you from the consortium. One is that if you are a consortium member, which I think most of you probably are, but potentially some of you are not, this is a renewal period, and connection with the work group is tied to your consortium membership. So be sure to watch for your renewal information so that you can get your membership renewed if you don't have it set to renew automatically. I'm going to type an email address in the chat in case you have questions about your membership. You can reach out to us anytime there. So please renew. And then I just want to note some information that we'll try and get out to you as well after today's session, but there's a group of researchers at the University of Iowa who are doing some trans cancer experiences surveys. They want to speak with both patients and providers about experiences within research of trans folks here in Iowa. So I don't have a link for you or anything right now, but we will send some information out to you. And so if that's of interest, please watch for that in your inboxes. And I think that's it for me, Bree.
Okay, awesome. Thanks for sharing all that, Kelly. Yeah, so thank you so much, everyone, for attending this roundtable. We hope you guys enjoyed it. And yeah, keep an eye out in your email. We'll be sending out the links with the recording to today's roundtable, as well as links for the post-evaluation survey, which has also been put in the chat. And yeah, thank you so much for attending, everyone. Thank you again to Margaret. And yeah, hope everyone has a wonderful day.